Hello, I'm Hunter Foster. I'm the artistic director for the Red House Art Center in Syracuse, New York, and we're back for another edition of Red Talks, which we do every Tuesday night at 6:30, except for today, which is Thursday. That's right. So we had to shift it a little bit. We're busy working around the theater, trying to cook up a season. With all this going on, we're working hard day and night trying to figure out what we're going to do for the fall and hopefully for the spring. And we got a lot of great things coming up, including our fall fundraiser, Ain't It Grand, which is going to be all virtual, and it's going to be happening on October 8th. And it's going to be on Stars in the House, which is very exciting. So Seth and James allowed us to use their platform to have our annual fall fundraiser, which is going to be October 8th at 8 p.m. It's going to be on the YouTube channel, there on Stars in the House, Facebook Live. It's going to be everywhere. And it's going to be hosted by Ted Lange and Fred Grandy, which we're so excited about. A lot of great stars are going to be on, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We had a challenge grant that a generous donor donated money and matched every dollar that anyone donated to the theater, dollar for dollar. So all the way up to $20,000, which was absolutely amazing. And we reached our goal. And so this evening is going to be a celebration of just all the things that we've sort of accomplished, and thanking all of our donors out there who have been supporting us through this very, very difficult time. And I can't tell you, it's hard to believe it's been 6 months. The last time that I was in the theater was Romeo and Juliet, which was back in February, which was our last production before we had to shut down. And we shut down right in the middle of Fences. We were doing production of Fences, and we had finished 1 week of rehearsals before we had to shut down, just like every other theater around the country. So we're excited to continue to bring you stuff virtually, to continue to have these shows. Red Talks has been 6 months. And we've missed maybe 2 or 3 weeks. We've done them every single week, and it's been a real pleasure to continue to reach out to the community and to bring on members of the community, both in New York and in Syracuse. So before we bring on our guest this evening, I just want to say something that I think is important. And we have I don't want to get political because it's not my place to be political, but I just want to say that leadership matters. And we have an important election coming up this year, probably the most important election of our lifetime. And whoever you support, whoever you believe that can change our economy and change the conditions of the pandemic, please go vote. I know it's scary. Make sure that if you're not going to go in person, that you're going to mail in your ballot or absentee ballot. Just make sure you vote. This is really, really an important election. And who we elect, not just from the presidency, but all the way down to our local leaders, our state leaders, they're the ones that are going to have to get us out of probably one of the worst, years that our country's ever had to go through. So please, 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 we ask you to please wear a mask. First of all, wear a mask, and please go vote. And I will say, I'm very proud of Central New York. I've seen some of the mask problems around the country, and it's been great to see how Central New York has handled the pandemic. Our leaders have done a great job locally, and it's good to go out and know that people are really taking it seriously. They're wearing masks, they're washing their hands. We're doing it at the theater right now. We've had summer camps go on. We have a learning lab that's going on right now. So we've had kids in the building, and we've been making sure that they're safe every single day. We wash hands, we take temperatures, if anyone feels sick, they go home. So being on top of this is going to get us through this quicker, and ignoring it is going to make this go on longer. So we have to be disciplined, and we have to do the things that we need to do, because I want to get back to theater. I want to have audiences come back, and I want to do shows. So please, 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 please continue to wear your mask and to do the things that are necessary. Okay, so let's get to tonight's guest. So I have known Georgia Stitt. We'll talk about how long we've known each other, but probably since 2004. We both worked on the Broadway show, Little Shop of Horrors, and we have talked about working together, writing a show for a long time. And we wrote a show probably about 6 or 7 years ago together, and then we sort of put it away. It's one of those things where we didn't really, we didn't finish it, and we put it away. And then she called me up, like, I think it was the week after the pandemic, and said, hey, let's just start writing our show again. And I said, sure. So we met for 2 days every single week for almost 6 months working on the show. And then we actually had a reading probably about 2 weeks ago, and we learned a lot from that. So I want to bring on Georgia Stitt, who is a great composer, lyricist, and musical director, and just a sort of like all around Broadway, person. I mean, you're so much part of our community in so many different ways, as a musical director, as an activist, as a composer, lyricist. I just feel like you do so many different things. So welcome to Red Talks, Georgia.
Thank you. Hi, Hunter. I'm happy to be here.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm fine.
Good. Yeah.
I mean, global pandemic, but I'm fine.
Global pandemic. And you're right. You're in New York right now, right?
I'm in New York City. Yeah. I'm in the basement of a brownstone right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so explain, but let's talk a little bit about how you got into, because, I think a lot of people want to know, like, how does one become a songwriter? How does one, what it takes that same thing with like being an actor, with the giant leap of saying, I'm going to be an actor, I'm going to be a songwriter, I'm going to be like, how did you start and how did you get into this career?
I mean, the oversimplified answer is, if one becomes a songwriter by writing songs, one just begins writing songs and then one is a songwriter. But I think you're asking specifically about career path. And I was just a girl who played the piano my whole life. Like, I had a piano teacher who was the church organist in my little town in Tennessee. And then I turned out to be pretty good at playing the piano, and things grew from there. And I became, I went away to summer camp to study music, one of those music nerd people. I was in the marching band, all those things. And then while I was in college, summer camps and college, I started studying composition classes, really just because I was curious about how it worked. I don't think I thought at the time that I was going to be a composer, but starting to understand music theory and how music gets put together and what's the science of music and the art and where do they meet. And I really thought I was going to be a classical music composer. I was going to write symphonies and string quartets and things like that, until I did summer stock theater. I got a job playing, summer stock is you do 9 shows, at least the one I did, 9 shows in 11 weeks, where you do a different show during the day, and you're rehearsing the show for next week during the day while you're doing the show from last week at night. So your brain is keeping 2 shows in that headspace at the same time. And I loved it. I loved theater people. I loved learning how shows got put together. And I sat there at the piano playing all the shows, and I thought, somebody wrote these. Who wrote these? So I was sort of late to the education of musical theater. I think a lot of people grow up loving shows and doing shows, and I was really more of a music kid. But then that's what brought me to New York, is because I could play the piano, there was work available. I could play auditions, I could play coachings, I could do voice lessons, and eventually I started working as rehearsal pianist. Audition pianist leads to rehearsal pianist. And there really is a ladder that you can climb if you get a foot in the door to begin with. And there's certainly all sorts of conversations going on now about how one gets a foot in the door and who the door is open to and who the door is not open to. But I mean, through my schooling and the internships that I did and the people that I met, I did get a foot in the door, and then climbed that ladder. So you're like the rehearsal pianist, and then you're the assistant conductor, and then you're the associate conductor, and eventually you're the music director. And so for 10 years, I was working as a music director in the Broadway community and kind of secretly writing on the side. Maybe not so secretly, but it's not like that was paying any bills. I was just writing on the side. And then I guess for me, at a certain point, I was established enough that I could reach out to performers and say, will you sing this song of mine in a concert? Will you record this song of mine? And in many ways, it was the collaborations with the people who had fan bases and had a public attention that helped launch me. Certainly when I released my first album in, I think it was 2000, I don't even remember. I don't remember what year it was, before 2000. Is that right? I don't know. I have to look it up. You're laughing at me because I'm like, days. But that was the thing that switched my career from being like, oh, she's a music director. Then I released the album and people were like, oh, she writes too. That was when it shifted.
Well, it was so, because you forget sometimes because people and you're like, oh, that's just Georgia. And then my favorite is like, we would have auditions here in Syracuse and someone come in, I go, what's that song? And they go, it's Georgia Stitt. And they're just all, proud. And I was like, oh yeah, she's like a you're a badass songwriter. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like it was just so cool that like that they came in and were singing your song, and we're so proud to say who it was by, and so
it is a real mark of your accomplishment when someone sings your song when you're not in the room. You know, that's really cool to hear that.
Yeah,
back.
it was really cool, and I felt a sense of pride. I don't know, like, you know, yeah, because like sometimes you also think, and this is not a knock on Syracuse at all, but you know, I've been sort of blown away being here, because you think, oh, New York, only in New York do we know who these composers are, and it's not true. Like the people in Syracuse, they're really savvy with, especially the young ones. Like when I teach the camp, and they know every composer, know every song, and they know Ryan Scott Oliver, they know
of
you,
course they do.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that you know, the way that information gets spread these days, like that they know because of the internet and because of the way information gets shared. We didn't have that sort of situation. We didn't have that when we didn't have access to composers that way.
No, I was saying that when I was telling some kids this, I said, you know, when I grew up, I said, we didn't have social media. We didn't have Playboy.com. We didn't have, you know, Broadway World. I said, the only reason you knew what a show was is that you would get the album and you look at the pictures. At
the library. I got the albums at the library.
Me too. I would go get the cassettes at the
Hunter, we're old.
I know. I would get the cassettes. I would go through the catalog, and then I would get the cassettes, and then I would look.
The cassettes.
Yeah, and so I was obsessed with Chess, the musical, and I didn't know what it was about. You couldn't order the script on Amazon. You couldn't get it on the internet. There was no video footage, so I staged the whole show in my head. Maybe that's why I wanted to be a director, because I was literally just like,
why.
Yeah, I was like, maybe this is what happens here, and this is what happens here. Anyway, well, so you've written how many shows by this point? I mean, you have
I don't know.
They're on your wall. We can look
we can look at some of them.
Snow Child, Big Red Sun.
Snow Child, Big Red Sun. Sing Me a Happy Song doesn't exist. We did something, then we abandoned it. There's The Water. It was done at the University of Michigan. There's over here, Samantha Spade, Ace Detective, and Mosaic. Yeah, you know, they're not Broadway shows, but they're shows that got produced, and that have, some of them have a bigger life than others. And then there's just as many that never got produced, that are abandoned, you know. And so that's why the albums get made, when you have like good songs that never quite make it to the final stage.
Yeah, I directed one of your readings of Big Red Sun.
You did Big Red Sun.
Yeah, and what I was sort of struck by how because you orchestrated it as well, and how like you would play a song, and I was like, oh, that's a good song, and then but you knew, I don't know, it's amazing to me how composers can play something, and it seems, I don't want to use the simplistic on the piano, and then all of a sudden when it's orchestrated, it becomes this complex piece, and you always had that part in your head. Right? I do usually have that in my head. I have a sense of what's the reason I'm sort of stunned is because I think I'm always surprised that everybody doesn't think that. That's just, you know, when you speak music, you do. I don't mean to imply you don't speak music, but when you speak music, it's like this is the shorthand for what's ultimately going to be something else. But I guess not everybody does. But I do think orchestrally, or at least I have orchestrated versions in my head, and I think it's. One of the frustrations is trying to convey that. Like, you can speak to the fact, like in our own process, but I don't want to make demos, because there's sort of something about how you finalize something when you make a demo, and then whoever's listening is like, oh, that's what it is. And I think, well, I don't know what it is until we get in stage and we live with it a little bit. I don't want to commit to it until it lives in the actors and in the show and in the space. But that's interesting you say that, because I think that's how we're very similar, because you know, I'm the same way. I think sometimes producers, and unfortunately now I have to count myself as a producer because I'm an artistic director, but they want results. You know, they want theater, they want results. And sometimes, like, the best things that I've ever been a part of or created is when it was just this mush of ideas that you took a workshop or something and carved it into something. You know what I'm saying? Like, that to me was more exciting than trying to figure everything out before we did something. Now, I'm not saying you just throw things at the wall, but I know what you're saying is, like, I don't know until when the actors and the director and everyone gets in the room and tries to make something.
But I think when you're the creative, I think it's a difference. It's like being in the driver's seat or being in the passenger seat. Like when you're in the driver's seat, you sort of trust, like if there's a moment of, like if something darts out in front of me, I can handle it. Like I know how to do that. And if you're in the passenger seat, you're like, I'm going to die. And there's something about the creative is in the driver's seat. Like especially people who thrive on, as you and I both do, we know, because we often write up to the very last minute on a deadline. There's nothing that makes you work more prolifically than like knowing people are going to show up and read it in a week. But you and I both are like, when the moment comes and somebody asks me what it is, I'll put it on paper. I know I can put it on paper because I trust myself that the idea is going to be there. And I trust you that the idea, like I trust my collaborators that the idea is going to be there. But I think certainly someone who's paying for it, once, a producer is going to say like, yes, but I need to see it. It does need to exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think some of the great artists though, whether it was Fosse or, I mean, they were even with like, sometimes his process was like, some great artists are a mess.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're a mess. We're not.
I don't want to be a mess.
No, we're not. But like Bill Finn is a perfect example of someone, and I don't mean because he's amazing, but it's a lot to working with him once. I'm like, oh, what is all this? I don't know what all this is. It's just a lot.
Yeah, you're in the room with the whole process.
Yes, yeah. But it's amazing what comes out of that sort of chaos is brilliance.
Yes.
And yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about. Also, you've written. You have 4 albums, correct?
I have 4 albums.
And your 4 albums. What are your 4 albums? They are.
This Ordinary Thursday is the first one that came out, and then
I'm going to put them up so people can go.
Oh, that's fun.
Well, yeah, people should go and
yeah, they should buy my albums.
I did.
Everyone buys albums now. You should at least listen to them. I mean, great if you buy them, but
this is their latest.
Right, that's A Quiet Revolution. That came out in May. Then that's fun to. That was to release an.
I know, it's just the way it works.
To release an album in a pandemic was
what,
fun.
What if I did this? I'll do this. Oh no, then you go away.
It's okay. I'll just.
What about this? Oh, there you are. You're little.
This is how our work sessions are too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I released it on May 1st when we were we had already all gone into quarantine, and we had all these like public appearances and concerts and things planned that we couldn't do. And at the same time, I was able to get a kind of attention, in terms of publicity and the people who wrote about the album and that sort of thing, because the world was so starved for attention, or not for attention, but for content. There was, for new content. So anyway, there's some, if I do say so myself, some great songs and some great performances on that.
Yeah, really great. Who are some of the people that are on the album? Is Kate Baldwin? Right? Kate
Baldwin, Sutton Foster, you might know her.
Yep. No, I know
Brandon Victor Dixon, Joshua Henry, Betsy Wolfe, Laura Benanti, Jeremy Jordan. Great people, really great people. Yeah.
And this is another one of your albums?
That's the first one. That's This Ordinary Thursday. That was the album that I released that basically said, she's not just a music director, she writes songs too. Yeah. And then there's My Lifelong Love, and
I don't have that graphic, but that's okay.
My Lifelong Love, and then the song cycle called Alphabet City Cycle that Kate Baldwin recorded. So
go to Amazon.com and check out Georgia Stitt and all of her albums and buy them, support your composers and songwriters.
Thank you.
Better than going on Spotify, right?
It is better. It is better. It is interesting because I think the way we consume music has changed so much. But just so people watching know, like every album I pay for it myself. So you spend a few years saving up money, knowing that you're going to pay the singers, pay the musicians, pay the engineers, pay for the studio time, pay for all that. You pay for that up front. And then when your album sells, you start to make the money back. And so it's been an interesting thing. When the first album came back, it paid for itself. And now it's only been a few months. I haven't seen a check yet since May 1st. But the way albums sell is different. We consume music differently. Yeah. So if you are a person who really, really values new material coming out from songwriters, the best thing you can do is buy what they release.
Well, I'm going to play a song that's on the album, and then we're going to talk about what show this song is from, because it's from a show that George and I have been writing, the one I talked about. It's called The Big Boom. And we'll talk about what it's about maybe a little bit, and then how we wrote it during the pandemic, how we stay creative. But I love this song. It's sort of it speaks so much about what's going on in our world, and even more now in so many ways.
More so than even when we wrote it. It's a few years old, and it has only become more true.
This is Brandon Victor Dixon. And let me put him on.
Liberals hate religion and the greedy corporations. Business hates the liberals and the poor. Poor folks need religion, so they tend to be conservative. The liberals probably care about them more. After each election, you've got all these evangelicals claiming God's the only one who leads. But religion can be selfish, so you find these poor believers asking government to satisfy their needs. It's all circle, who's wrong, who's right. You didn't come to hear me out, you came to fight. It's what we do now, I mark you right. Separate American black and white. That hurricane, remember, they were Brooklyn underwater. People screamed for FEMA to appear. Liberals shouted outrage, started wars all over Facebook. But the Mormons were the first ones who were here. You can keep religion and politics of power. Sometimes I don't know where to begin. If you don't subscribe to any country or another, then you're never on the outside looking in. It's all politics. There is resistance everywhere, but we're all the same. So speak your claim now, to the left, to the right. Separate American black and white. Are you brave enough to say what you believe, even if it means you stand alone? Heroes are the humans, see the other humans, and they're beyond the things they always know. It's your opposition face, oppression could be right. That's how we get beyond this life of the great American black and white.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's great, such a great song. But I think that's what I'm talking about is where you like when you play. I heard that song a lot that you played for me on piano, but I never heard the impact of the bass line the way it was until you orchestrated it. It was something about when I was like, oh. It has a soulful beat to it. Mm-hmm. Then you add this cello to it, which sort of is from a different world. So orchestral, I'm thinking, oh, she has just put the two different worlds. I don't know if that's what you meant to do that, but it's like because the cello sort of felt sort of down homey and Americana, and then yet there's this like soulful beat. And I was like, oh, is she playing orchestrally with the two black and white, basically the two different worlds, two different sort of styles of music that are contrasting each other? I don't know. That's what I got from it.
I love it. Yes and no. I mean, yes, but also that was the instrumentation I had for that particular concert. And so there's another version of it where that cello line is played by a tenor saxophone. And so it's probably less stark, but there is something about the regularity of the, I mean, yes, the regularity of the bass line that like has to lock into a metronome, like a really tight groove, and then the fluidity of the other line.
Yeah.
So whether you're talking about the timbre of the instrument or the way the instrument functions rhythmically, it is doing that. The idea that they're opposed to each other. And
yeah,
I
that's
think,
what I, yeah.
I think that's
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
The idea that music is dramaturgy is what makes me tick. It's so exciting. The idea that you know, for people watching, Hunter and I spend so much time talking about the characters and the plot and the themes and what it means, and there are weeks that go by where I don't write any music because we're trying to figure out like, how does this work, or what's the song going to be, or how does this character get from this point to this point, or what does he really want, or what is their conflict, or all of those dramaturgical things. But then when I sit down to write the music, it's all in there because composers who write for the theater are ingesting all of that information and then trying to use the storytelling in the way that they write the music, which is part of why I love orchestrating my own work, because it's in there too. I think, but when something goes big, like Broadway shows, the process moves too quickly. You're doing rewrites to the show in the rehearsal room that are going to go into the show tomorrow night, and there's not time for you also to orchestrate those changes necessarily. So usually there's a team of people. But when things are developed slowly, like in a pandemic, you have time to think about those colors as well.
Speaking of the pandemic, what's it like? Writing during the pandemic, creating, being artistic? Because we talked about this as well. Is that sometimes it's been difficult to be creative in the pandemic because you have so much on your mind. I know when this whole thing first started, my mind was filled with life. I remember when Dr. Fauci came on MSNBC in the morning and said, "We're looking at 2 million deaths," and I was like shaking in the bathroom, and Jen's like, "You have to come out." And I'm like, "I can't." I was so terrified to think that if I walked outside the door, I could die. Mm-hmm. Obviously, things are bad, but not to that level. But it was difficult, I think, early on, right? Or it felt difficult
yeah, very difficult. I mean, yeah, you don't really know what's happening. You don't really know how long we're going to be in this moment. There are just so many things in my head, and I know from our conversations in yours as well, at all times. I also have 2 children, and so at their school age, they're 10 and 14, and so like, what are they doing? And they're home, like they also are not leaving the house, and so it's interesting to watch some people's response over the last 6 months to be like, "Oh, I have all of this time," and all of these things, like Hamlet was written in a quarantine, or all those things. And I think, well, Hamlet probably didn't have 2 children and the internet, Shakespeare anyway. But the idea that there is there's that, like what is being asked of you in terms of your time. But I think what you're getting at also is just the mental capacity that you have to live in the what if. I think in order to be a writer, you have to have the ability to live in the what if. Like, what if this character did choice A? What if this character did choice B? What would happen? And it all seems so frivolous in light of what if I walk outside and contract a disease that kills my mother-in-law? Like, it's just, it's too real. There's too much to take in. So I think the longer this goes on, the more the immediate day-to-day feels manageable. Like, okay, I know that I can walk outside, and if I wear a mask, and if I wash my hands, and these are the things that I do, and these are I'm not getting on the subway, and I'm obviously not going to the theater, but I can go to the grocery store. Like, you start to figure out what's manageable. But you're right, in the beginning, I was scared to leave the house. We couldn't do anything.
Yeah, especially in New York. New York was in the it was the epicenter of the world at one point, and that's the tough part about, I've lived in New York for over 25 years. And I think of all the sort of, I moved to New York right at the end of the AIDS crisis. So I moved to New York in 1992. And I think the AIDS crisis with the cocktails really weren't coming into play until 94. So there was still, the AIDS was still at the tail end of the crisis, but that was happening. Obviously 9/11, which were you in town for 9/11? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in town for 9/11. I was in town for Hurricane Sandy, and that, was not in town for the pandemic. But it's hard to see New York City, which is such a great town, get hit so many times. It's only, it breaks my heart because I love the city so much, and to see especially this one, which has had a bigger effect than I think because 9/11 we jumped right back in. Like we were in 2 days we were back on Broadway.
Well, I think what you're the reason I'm having thoughts right now is because all of those things that you just described were culture defining horrible things, but New York rallied and came back. I just remember you and Jen in particular with Hurricane Sandy. You guys were the ones that were out there volunteering, and you were out there sandbagging and delivering food, and you were out. I just remember you being at the forefront of the rallying cry and the response. And
people. I mean, sorry to interrupt, but to talk about that that's how great New York is. Is that I remember Hurricane Sandy happened, and we were, there was that one day after the hurricane, we were in Midtown, and there was no distress. There was nothing. I mean, it was like nothing had happened. The lights never went out, so we didn't know what had happened across the city. And then New York One was in Staten Island, and the woman was screaming, saying, "We're here, and no one's helping us. We're underwater. Our houses are destroyed." And I was like, and that was the impetus, obviously, for some of the song lyrics are actually talking about the hurricane. Yeah. So I remember Jen and I were like, we should do something, and so we posted on Facebook, and we were like, we should donate, and if you guys donate to us on our PayPal, we will buy supplies, or if you bring supplies. I was doing this show, believe it or not, and I said, bring it to the rehearsal space. And I walked in the next day for rehearsal, and the whole room was filled with supplies. And then before you knew, people were giving me $1,000, $2,000. I had like $12,000 that we spent. And that's how generous and wonderful New Yorkers are.
And I think that's part of what feels different this time is that after 9/11, I talk a lot about how I have a friend who after 9/11 felt so helpless and there was just a sense of like, I don't know how to help when the tragedy is that great. And he talks about how he just went out in his neighborhood and started picking up trash because he was like, anything I can do to help the city feel more like what it's supposed to do. And I was very moved by that response to it. But I think in this pandemic moment, like, the city can't rally. I was very moved by how for a long time at 7:00 we all went out and clapped for the essential workers. New Yorkers did that all over the globe. People did that. But it was a thing that I was like, oh, this is New York rallying in the way it can, because we're scared. We're scared to gather, and we're scared to be in close contact with each other. And so I think everyone has a desire to really be responsive, and we can't.
Yeah,
so it's really hard.
Yeah, it is hard because I think that. You're right. I felt the one takeaway I had from 9/11 is how supportive we were for each other and how supportive we were for the firemen and the policemen. And then you add this pandemic's been extremely difficult because it's gone on for such a long time. It wasn't just one day and then we recovered. Katrina was one day and we recovered. This has been going on for such a long time. And it's been so politically, charged. We did not have these political issues. Everyone was rallied behind, we all rallied behind each other, and there was no political. Until the Gulf War, but that was later. But initially, there was none of it. There was no blue, red, and we believe this, we believe that. Everyone did whatever we could in order to, make sure we were protecting ourselves. And now it's just so odd. Like it's to see the using this as for political gain to me. And I'm not just blaming both sides. Or I'm blaming anyone. I'm not going to say that. I'm blaming anyone who uses this for political gain or for weaponizing it. It doesn't make sense. Or saying that masks don't do anything, or
that's the song. Like the Great American Black and White. We can talk about it being a racial divide, or we can just talk about it being left and right. That the black and white of anything that's binary. Like you believe this, I believe that. And the lyric is, "You didn't come to hear me out. You came to fight." I think people show up ready to fight and ready to defend what they believe.
And that's a lot of, and to pivot towards our show. A lot of that is interesting because our show, to give you a little bit of context, is about a man who believes that the world is coming to an end. And it was based off of an event that happened in May of 2014, in which a preacher predicted the end of the world on like May 6th at like 6 p.m. And I was in Bryant Park in New York City, and around 5, I was reading a book, and it was like 5:55, and then all of a sudden it was a bright sunny day. All of a sudden at 5:55, the day of, clouds started coming in, and it's 5:57, and the clouds covered the sun, and there were black clouds, and I was like, "What are?" We were been making fun of this guy, and here we go. And I looked over, and there was a girl next to me on a blanket, and she looked at me. Both looked at each other, just going, "Is this happening? Is this really happening?" Of course, it didn't happen. But it was,
or maybe it did, and we're all living in an alternate reality.
Yeah. But that was sort of the basis for, and a lot of it was those people who believed in this preacher. They sold their belongings, they quit their jobs, they gave all their money to the church, and basically gave up their lives because they believed this preacher. And so we thought that's the basis for our show, is a father who has 3 children, and he calls them up to the mountain in North Carolina, and basically reveals that he's given all his money away and he sold everything because he believes the world's going to end. But what was interesting about that is knowing now, writing it before the pandemic, and then how the pandemic and the racial issues that have been hitting our country so hard, or have come to light, I should say, is it how that was worked into our show. So, I mean, I guess that's a question. As a writer, you're always sort of adjusting towards, what's going on in the world too. You're constantly, as the world changes, what you're writing changes, because you're influenced obviously emotionally by the things that are happening. Do you feel like that? How much do you feel like has changed in our writing in the pandemic? I mean, or how much do you think has influenced the writing? I
think it always influences the writing, and I think Hunter and I, we're both readers too, and so I think a lot of our conversations are like, "Oh, I just read this great book," and then we recommend them to each other, so the other one reads the book, and then that works its way into the show in some way, that we both were influenced by this idea or this thing that lived. Yeah,
I'm on book 6. Book 6.
Things we read together.
Yeah, I'm reading Educated right now.
Right, and I read Overstory because you told the Overstory because you told me to. It's a great. I mean, really, it's been a real bonus of the last 6 months, is just sharing books and reading things together and talking about them. But those things work our way into the show.
Oh, don't read Station 11.
Well, it's on my night table. This is freaky. I don't know how it got on my night table because I didn't buy it, and so I asked my husband if he bought it, and he said no. So I don't know. You mentioned that book, and then I was looking for the next thing I was going to read, and it was there, and I was like, how did this get here? And Jason said, have we had like a house sitter who maybe left it? But it's like this magical book that showed up. Oh,
well, here's a freaky thing about Station 11. So I was looking for a book. Somebody recommended it. This was pre-COVID. And so I was on vacation in February. We were on vacation in Mexico in February 23rd, 24th, like right before COVID. So I downloaded Station 11 and on my Kindle, and never read it. And then when the pandemic started, I'm like, oh, that book, I didn't know what it was about.
You just started reading it.
I started reading it, and then I got to one point, I literally, I couldn't breathe because it hit so close to home, and I had to walk around the house. I was like hyperventilating. It's really on the nose, basically, and I think it was written in 2015.
Well, I can't handle it right now. I'm not gonna read it right now.
No, and then
but
we were cleaning out books, and then there's a hard copy in our bookshelf. I was like, where did this come from?
We both have unexplained copies of that book.
Yes, I said to Jen, is it yours? She goes, no. I go, well, I don't know when I got it.
Oh my gosh, what if it's just showing? Everyone check your bookshelves. If Station 11 is there, then it's extraterrestrials.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What were you? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to get back to your original question about how much current events work themselves in. I think they're always there, and it's we have been very careful to make sure we're not writing about 2020 and the global pandemic, and then we're not writing about this presidency, and we're not writing about we're not writing about this moment in particular, because the show is set in a moment where there was a preacher who made this proclamation and people believed it, and that is not ours. So it's important that it's not set in a year where that event didn't happen. But there is, like, I remember I wrote a lyric recently that said the father is talking about why he believes that things, and he says, the honeybees are dying and the oceans are a mess, and the Middle East, the wars never stop in the Middle East, and these are all signs of the apocalypse. And one of the things he says is, we just survived a plague. And so I think there are vague mentions to what our culture has gone through without it being specific to this moment. But I do think I used to say that it was a show about how, this father and the 3 adult children. And I used to say it's a show about how you love someone when they don't believe the same thing you do. What does that look like? And how hard is that? But I think it was sort of a vague thing 3 or 4 years ago. And this year, I feel the personal challenge of it. I feel the personal challenge of like the people in my life who others would, block from Facebook because you're the person who believes the opposite of me. Therefore, I cut you out. And I think, no, I don't want to cut you out because you're significant to me. But it's challenging to figure out how we're gonna interact when we're so polarized. The thing that is the most important to me is not important to you. And so how does that not feel like a slap in the face? How does that not feel like, you're denying my right to exist? Which is not the same as like our politics are different and we believe different things about taxes. It's like my right to existence, my identity. So I think it's just gotten so heightened.
And we have similar backgrounds because we both come from the South. So
yeah,
which I think I'm not knocking the South. I'm just saying that there is a different mentality. Specifically, my family comes from Appalachia. So there's I read that book. What's the book about Appalachia? Oh my God, I'm blanking.
Hillbilly Elegy?
Hillbilly Elegy, yeah. And he says that people from Appalachia only care about 2 things, God and country. And I feel like that is so indicative to what a lot of people think. And so, and which is, people have every right to be patriotic and believe in God. But it's when it becomes like this battle between and it gets to be that there's no middle ground between the 2 viewpoints. That's where I worry, is that we're not compromising. We're not seeing the good in both sides.
Right. Right. Which is ultimately where we're trying to get with the show.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's interesting, like when we're in working on the show and thinking about the way our earlier drafts, and if people, I don't know if anyone who writes or, it really is, as someone who has been an actor and I've directed and I've written shows, it really is the hardest thing to do because you're just kind of, it's also the hardest thing to sit through. Like even the reading we sat through, I'm just sweating the whole time.
That's so hard.
I can't explain it. And in the
I always say about readings, first of all, like let's take even the Zoom reading part out of it, but just any reading at all. I always say that I want a sign that I can hold up that says, yes, I know, I see it too. Because there are things that go by and everybody's like, oh, that's bad. And I'm like, I know, I'll fix it. I see. Yeah. But then on Zoom, on Zoom, everyone's muted. And so something goes by and I'm like, that was funny. Nobody's laughing. You look up, everybody's like, where's my place and who's talking? And, the technology of it, there's like nobody actually interacting with each other. That's hard.
And the mute's on. So you don't know what's funny because the mute is on. So except for the one person who doesn't mute themselves and you can hear them laugh.
Or cough or sneeze or dog bark.
Is anything else just from your time? I mean, we've covered so much. We've covered so much about, which is interesting because the things we've talked about are so ingrained. Like every time we bring up some topic, I'm like, oh, that's in our show. Oh, that's in our show too. That's in our show. Even Katrina, when I got holding back Katrina, I'm like, oh yeah, we talked about Katrina. What else have you learned anything as a writer? Is there anything that you'll take from this moving forward as a writer, or as an artist? From
our show?
Just from this whole experience.
From this time.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm far enough away from it to be able to have that much self-reflection. I'm sure there are things I will take away from it. I mean, I think when I look at it just outside of myself through the lens of what the entire industry is going through, I've heard people say that we are going through 3 pandemics right now. So there's obviously our response to COVID, and then there's our response to the cry for racial justice in our country and in our industry. But then there's also climate change and the fires and the floods and the things that are happening that physically impact where we live and how we live. And I think if we're not using this moment to do like the deep soul searching reevaluation of what we really prioritize, then we're wasting it. And I don't mean like you have to be productive. Like there are days and there are people who can't get out of bed, and that's valid. And that's a valid response to what's happening right now. But I just mean if we come out of this I mean, assuming that there is a come out of this, and we like there is a day where like we have jobs and we go back to work and that sort of thing, and we haven't changed how we do business, then what, then it's a missed opportunity for sure. So one of the things we haven't talked about is that I run a not-for-profit. I run an organization.
Please, yes.
Yeah, I run
Please
an organization called Maestra. Maestra Music, and it's a charity that is our mission statement is that we serve the women who make the music in the musical theater industry. So it's the composers and the music directors and the pit musicians and the arrangers and orchestrators and the sound designers, and the number, like just looking at the pit musicians in the Broadway community, the number of women that work in that space hovers around 22%. And so, and they are heavily, it's interesting how instruments are sort of gendered. Like when you think about a flute player or a harpist or a cellist, you can think of women. And when you think about bass players and rhythm guitar players and drummers, percussionists, there are not as many women, low brass trombone players, things like that. And so we're looking at, giving support, visibility, and community to those women. And that has been enormously active. That organization has been enormously active through this pandemic time. We had to cancel our fundraiser in the spring, but it was going to be March 30th, I think. It was right when everything shut down. And so we had to shift very quickly into doing things online, offering workshops online and figuring out how to build community online. And that has been very illuminating for me in terms of who shows up for things, who's demanding things from us. I mean, in a challenging but good way, who's saying, what's your policy on this? What are you doing about that? Are you at the forefront of this conversation? And so it has been interesting to me to try to lead a group of people through a time that feels just as scary to me as it must to them. But really leaning on who my colleagues are and who the board is, who the advisory board is, and what they need. I think that's something that I'll take away from this time, is that we cannot go back to the way we did things before, because we have been changed by what we collectively experienced.
Is there a come back on here for a second? Is there a place people can donate?
Yeah, that'd be great. MaestroMusic.org is the name of the organization. There's a donate page on the website, but if you go to MaestroMusic.org, you can read all about it.
Music.org. Yeah, Maestra.
Yep.
MAE, right?
Yep. MaestroMusic.org.
Great.
And it's called that because, the maestro is the conductor. There it is. The maestro is the conductor of the orchestra. And maestra is the feminine of the word maestro. So if you type maestro in, it autocorrects it back to maestro.
Yeah,
it's
please.
Like,
yeah. No, but I mean, like all organizations right now need your support. And even if $5 helps, it really does. Because if 500 people, it really does. People are like, oh, what is my $5? Oh, seriously.
It really does. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
We have some events where we ask people to speak or teach or something, and we pay them $50 or $100. And I think, somebody donates $50 and thinks that doesn't make any difference. And that allowed someone to get paid for showing up, which makes them feel respected and valued for what they contributed. $50 is not enough for showing up, but it's not nothing. And so that's, every dollar helps. I mean, I'm just loving that. Like here we have the Maestro Music org, and we also have Please Donate to the Red House. It's like everybody, if you are in a position to donate, just find the thing that you believe in and donate to that. And then also, I'm going to echo what you said. It's so important that you vote. It's so important that you.
Oh my God, please.
That you participate in this process. I get so mad at people who complain about the state of the world, and then when you say, "What are you doing?" They're like, complaining.
But and it's not just. I mean, we heap a lot of criticism towards Washington, but it's so important for your local leaders, for the mayor of New York, for your local senate. I mean, your state senators. I have to give kudos to Ryan McMahon, who is our county executive. And to be honest, I don't know if he's a Republican or Democrat. I have no idea. But Ryan McMahon was a good, really, really good voice for our county here and during the pandemic. And again, I couldn't tell you if he's a Republican or Democrat, and that's good, because if I might be influenced if I knew what he was, but he did a great job. And I have to say, I felt like our state handled this maybe not perfectly, because I still think that the arts are being ignored by the state, and you know the economy of these cities like Syracuse, especially New York City, they thrive on the theater. The theater, when people come down to the theater, they're paying for parking, they're going to restaurants, they're going to retail, the coffee shops, the bars after. It's all driving the economy of downtown. So supporting your local theater is going to help the economy of downtown, especially New York City. If Broadway can't, I mean, the Broadway, I didn't realize this. I don't know if you heard this as well. Is that Broadway makes more money than all 10 New York sports teams combined. That's a staggering figure. Think about that.
It's an unbelievable statistic.
Yes. If you think about it, the Phantom of the Opera is made more money than Star Wars. It's made more money than Avatar or any of the top Titanic, the movies that have made the Avengers. Like the Phantom of the Opera has made more money than any film. It's unbelievable. It's billions of dollars. So please support theater, because also the other thing is, and Maestra, support all your artists, because the thing is also, the people who grow up in theater, the people who are part of, George's organization, that we could be, it could be the next female version of Lin-Manuel, or it could be the next great actor, or the next person who could change things and help our society, help our community. So like when you're supporting theater, you're supporting the next generation of artists and people that are going to make real change in our country. So
and let me just say one other thing is, we say this a lot when we do our workshops, that not everyone is in a position to donate right now. Like I personally have not had an income in a long time, and I'm really excited to find something that's going to pay me money. But for people who are in that position, you can, if you follow on social media, I know this just seems like a ploy to get more followers, but the truth is, if you follow on social media, then you're getting the messaging, then you're part of the community, and every now and then you'll retweet something or you'll respond to something, and that actually is a kind of support. So if you engage with the organizations that you want to support, that counts too. It's not the same as dollars, but it really does count. So our social media is all MaestroMusic.org without the just like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that, MaestroMusic.org. And you can be part of the community, people talking to each other and being engaged about this. And also you should follow everything Red House puts out too, because Hunter's working his butt off.
Oh man, some tough times, but we'll do what we can.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Georgia. It's been great. We've almost got, I thought this was gonna be a half an hour, and we could probably do another hour.
Well, you and I could talk forever. Yeah.
Yeah. So we
have a work session tomorrow.
We do. I'm driving back to New York tomorrow, so I will get in time. Okay. So, all right. Thanks so much, Georgia. And again, if you please check out her all her songs on Amazon. Nice. Buy them. Don't just listen to them on Spotify.
Or just listen to them.
Or just listen to them. Well, thanks. I just want to thank Georgia for being on our show, and I want to thank everyone who watches Red Talks and supports our theater. As I've said many times, we're going through a really tough time right now, and it's all the theater organizations are struggling. So please support your local artists, your local theaters. And like Georgia said, it can be just retweeting or Red Talks, or just putting things out there that supports our theater. That's all going to help. It's all going to help. So stay tuned. You'll get some information about next Tuesdays. We're going to have a local actor who will be on next week, and we will continue sort of like the next round of Red Talks is going to be about just talking to local artists and how they've been getting through the pandemic. So there'll be one every week now, and we'll just keep talking, because I think I also want to make sure that artists get a voice to sort of talk about the things that have been going on. So as we've said, and I'll keep saying it, please vote. Please vote. Please wear your masks. Please stay safe. Please be supportive of each other and love each other during this difficult times. We need each other more than ever. And even though maybe we can't be in the same room with them, just send as much support and love as you can to all of those that are around you. And, take advantage of the time that we have. you know, because I think that's the one thing that I've gotten out of this is just, you know, make sure that you never take anything for granted. With that being said, thanks so much for watching Red Talks, and we will see you next week.